My name is Henry McKay. I am the Pennsylvania Program Director of a nonprofit organization called Solar United Neighbors. My colleague Alexis Miller is also here, one of our Pennsylvania team members who you may know, you may have been in touch with already. And we're going to be talking about solar energy in Pennsylvania, building a better energy system at home and at the ballot box. Now, this being May 2021, this probably isn't your first Zoom, but if it is, or if you just need a refresher, you can control your audio, mute and unmute if you want to ask questions using the mute button here. And I think the way we have it set up is you'll have to raise your hand using the raise hand button, and then we'll see that and we'll be able to unmute you during the couple Q&A breaks that we have in the program. You can submit questions you have or comments on what you're hearing at any time in the chat box. Alexis is putting some messages in there already that you should be able to see. You can have your chat messages go to all panelists, that's just me and Alexis, or all panelists and attendees, that means everybody here. And then we are recording this webinar. So if you are registered, you will get a copy of the recording or a link to the recording afterwards. And of course, anyone who can't make it tonight will also be able to see that recording link. Now, first, I want to ask Alexis to launch the poll. We just want to hear a little bit about who you are and why you're here and where you're coming from. So if you could just take a moment to fill out the very quick 2-question poll, that'd be great.
It's launched. It looks like we've got a couple people answering, so keep those answers coming in. Thanks, guys.
It looks like we have some Pittsburgh Penguins fans here who are probably a little disappointed. Now, while you're doing those poll questions, just a quick overview. So I'm going to introduce who Solar United Neighbors is if you're not familiar with us as an organization. Oh, and by the way, I also want to make sure we thank the League of Women Voters of Lawrence County, who is helping us host this event and has been helping promote it as well. We work a lot with various League of Voters chapters across Pennsylvania and nationally, and they are, without a doubt, some of the most effective partners we have on all kinds of work we do. So they're really excellent organizations to have in your community, and I'm very grateful we're able to work with them on something like this. We will first talk about the big picture, what is happening with solar nationally, how is this technology growing and spreading, both in Pennsylvania and nationally. We'll do a quick Rooftop Solar 101. That should answer some of the questions you have about how do you go solar, what do you need to know, how do you get started. And then we'll dive into solar policy in Pennsylvania. Now, solar policy is really some of the most important solar policy happens at the state level rather than the federal level. So it is important to follow what your state is doing in terms of solar policy if you are someone who considers himself a solar advocate. So we'll talk about the Alternative Energy Portfolio Standard, community solar, solar access laws, and some other solar legislation that we've seen pop up in Harrisburg. And then we'll talk a little bit about taking action and learning more. What can you do to be a more effective advocate, to learn more about going solar, to learn more about solar in your state and community. And then we'll pause for questions at the end. We're also going to pause for questions after the Rooftop Solar section. And I found this is a good practice, but I think this originally comes from military, BLUF, B-L-U-F, bottom line up front. So if there's one thing I want you to remember from tonight, it's that Pennsylvania is falling behind our neighbors in terms of solar adoption. So Maryland, New Jersey, New York are all aggressively growing their solar markets, and we are less than aggressive. Legislators will have a chance this year to set some more ambitious solar targets for Pennsylvania and to start to make us more competitive in terms of solar. But the window for action is small, and it's definitely not a sure thing that will happen. So we'll talk more about that later. Now, if you're not familiar with us, Solar United Neighbors, we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We are national. We have our headquarters in DC, and then we have people like me located all around the country who are working directly with solar advocates on the ground in their communities. I'm in Pittsburgh myself, helping them learn about solar, helping them go solar, and helping them fight for a cleaner and fairer energy system. Now let's share those poll results. So what do we have here? In terms of why you are all here, the most popular answer, which is to learn about solar policy so I can be a more effective advocate. That's great. I love seeing that. A lot of you, 30% of you are interested in installing solar in your home, and others are interested in just general education about solar. And it looks like we have a majority or a plurality of people coming from southeastern PA in the Philadelphia area, followed closely by southwestern Pennsylvania. So welcome, everyone. Okay, I'm going to close those results down. So solar in Pennsylvania and nationwide. So in Pennsylvania, solar has been growing, not always steadily. There have been up and down years, but 2020 was a big year for growth in Pennsylvania. There was a lot of growth nationally, also in residential solar in particular, so rooftop solar on homes. A lot of that seems to be driven by people who were all of a sudden stuck at home, will be using a lot more electricity and thinking, what are some home improvement projects I can do that can help me lower this electric bill that has suddenly become really high. But also, so this graph breaks it down into utility, residential, and non-residential. You can see 2020, there was this huge burst in utility scale activity. Now this data is from SEIA, the Solar Energy Industries Association, and I'm not entirely sure if those are projects that were completed or approved, or it's projects that were in some way started. Often a lot of developers will, for large scale solar, will buy find land to develop something and start working on it, but it may not actually materialize if the economics aren't right or if the right policy pieces aren't in place. But it was a big year for solar growth, especially if you live in a rural area in Pennsylvania. You probably know somebody who's been approached by a developer about solar, or maybe an installer about solar on their own property. Nationally, solar is a 50-state industry. There's solar in every state, although there's a lot of variation of where that solar is. And there's some states where, the obvious candidates, California has a ton of solar, of course, Hawaii, Arizona, New Mexico have a ton of solar, sunny places. But you also notice Minnesota, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts also have large amounts of solar. And the point I want to make there is whether a state has a lot or a little bit of solar isn't so much driven by climate. Solar panels are efficient enough that they work in Alaska, they work in cloudy Germany, they work in cloudy Pennsylvania. What really matters is the policy environment. Are the right policies in place? Things like net metering, so you can sell your excess energy back to the grid if you have solar in your home. Things like a portfolio standard, which we'll talk about, which set mandatory goals for how much energy utilities are getting from solar. So having the right policy environment is critical for having a lot of solar. In Pennsylvania, we've always been an energy leader. And if we get the policies right, we can be an energy leader going into the future as we move to new technologies like solar. And zooming in on Pennsylvania, this is a graph using data from the Pennsylvania Public Utilities Commission, or a map, sorry. It's color coded, and you can see the chart on the right kind of as a legend. The red counties have the most capacity of solar measured in megawatts, and then the blue and then purple counties have the least. And so some of this is unsurprising. You see a lot of solar in southeastern PA where a lot of people are in Pennsylvania, but you also have interesting spots. So Allegheny County, where Pittsburgh is, has a lot of solar. The surrounding counties also have good amounts of solar. And then the very rural, sparsely populated areas, kind of the Great Allegheny Forest area to the north of Allegheny County don't have a lot of solar. But there is at least a few solar installations in every county in Pennsylvania. It really is all over the place here. And in terms of where Pennsylvania ranks compared to other states, we're kind of in the middle of the pack. We rank 21st in the amount of solar overall as of 2020. So we're in the middle of the pack and we're kind of falling. Early on, we were a leader in growing renewable energy here. We set some goals that at the time were very ambitious back in 2004, but since then, a lot of our neighbors have surpassed us. Now let's talk about rooftop solar in particular, which a lot of you are here to learn about. So the basics of how this works in Pennsylvania. Now, this diagram here, the first thing I want you to notice is they're connected to the electric grid. So this is not an off-grid home. This is the most common way in Pennsylvania and most places in the country for people to go solar. They don't go completely off-grid. To do that, you need batteries, so you have so you can store energy to use during the night, during the winter when it's not sunny enough. But what most people do is they have a grid-tied solar system. And the way this works is when in the summer, they will often generate a lot more energy than they need. That excess energy goes back out into the grid, your utility sells it to somebody else, and you earn credits on your electric bill. And they're one-to-one credits. For every credit for every 10 kilowatts you export out to the grid, that's 10 free kilowatt hours you can use in the future. So during the winter, when it's not likely sunny enough to cover all of your electricity usage, you can just buy energy from the utility, or if you've built up this bank of credits during the summer, you can instead spend down those credits. So it's kind of like how rollover minutes used to work on cell phone plans. And so the result is you can cover a year's worth of energy usage, even though it's not evenly sunny all year. And then your energy bills are much lower. Every kilowatt hour you generate is one you don't have to buy. So you save a lot of money. Your electric bill goes down dramatically, depending on how large your system is compared to your usage. And a typical solar home will save thousands of dollars over a 25 to 30-year life of the system. At least in Western Pennsylvania, where I am, the typical payback period is around 8 to 12 years. It'll take you 8 to 12 years to save in electric bills what you spent going solar. So it is kind of a slower investment. It does take time for those profits to accrue, but it's very reliable, and it's one also that has really substantial environmental benefits. So there's not often a lot of cases where you can do something that's financially beneficial and has all these environmental and social benefits too. So this process by which you can export extra energy and you earn credits on your bill is called net metering, or sometimes net energy metering. And it's really critical for solar to make economic sense. In Pennsylvania, electric utilities are required by law to let you net meter if you go solar. That is the investor-owned electric utilities. So Duquesne Light, West Penn, PECO, PP&L, the large for-profit utilities that serve most Pennsylvanians are required by law to let you net meter. We actually have some of the best net metering in the country in Pennsylvania because it's what's called full retail rate net metering. So the energy you export is equal to the energy you import in value. And also we have fairly high caps on how large a net metered system could be. For example, for a residential system, you can have a system that's as large as 50 kilowatts, which is humongous. The average size is like 8 kilowatts. I've never seen a residential system that was, I don't think I've ever seen one that was over 30 kilowatts. So they can get pretty large. They're not capped at a low level. So we have great net metering in Pennsylvania, and actually a lot better net metering than you have in a lot of sunnier states, which is something to protect. It's something to take advantage of here in Pennsylvania. And I said it's just the investor-owned utilities who have to net meter. If you are a customer of a rural electric co-op or a municipal-owned electric company, they are not required to net meter because they're not regulated in the same way. But most, if not all of them in Pennsylvania, do have net metering that is very similar to what the investor-owned utilities offer. So pretty much any utility in Pennsylvania, you can go solar and have great net metering to take advantage of. Now, a lot of people go solar to save money because that cost of an installation, when you spread it out over the life of the installation, is cheaper than the electricity you would have otherwise been buying. A lot of people do it obviously for environmental reasons. Your home's electricity no longer contributes to air pollution, no longer contributes to climate change. And also you get a really unprecedented amount of control and independence over where your energy is coming from. You decide where it comes from, you're protected against future increases in utility prices, and you own it. So you get all the benefits that come with ownership, all those benefits that used to only be enjoyed by the utilities, by the companies who own power plants. Now you can essentially take a power plant and put it on your roof. And just to give you an idea of what it costs, Now, the caveat that solar is a very customized product. It's built for your own home or business, your own energy usage, your own budget, your own preferences. So there's a lot of variation in what solar can cost. And so this pricing here is based on the average price we've seen across all of our solar co-op programs in Pennsylvania, and that's $2.55 per watt. It tends to be a little lower than what you might get going on the market on your own, but it still is fairly representative of what you get going solar in Pennsylvania. So at that price, the upfront sticker cost of, we'll say, an 8 kilowatt system is about $20,000. After you get the 26% federal tax credit, that brings it down to $15,000. And that's a tax credit. It's not a tax deduction. It's a tax credit. So that means if you go solar this year, your system is completed this year. When you do your taxes next April for 2021, your tax bill is lowered by 26% of what it cost you going solar. Now, it's not a refundable tax credit, meaning so in this 8 kilowatt case, if you have less than $5,000 of a tax bill, you can't, eliminate your tax bill and then get a check for whatever's left over. You have to roll it over for multiple years. And this tax credit does steadily shrink. It was actually supposed to go down to 22% this year, but Congress extended it a little bit. So now it's still 26% this year and 26% next year, which is nice. It makes the end of the year a little bit less of a rush for getting those systems completed. And of course, Congress could change this. We know Biden's infrastructure plan had talked at least vaguely about expanding or extending the tax credit. So this might change, but of course, you have to wait for Congress to do something in that case and pass a law to do that. And that's no sure bet. So that brings this net cost of a system after the tax credit to about $15,000, and then you start saving money. You earn solar renewable energy credits, which have a cash value, which we'll talk more about later. And then mostly your savings come from a reduced electric bill. In this particular example, we estimate this home will have paid for its solar system and then some after 25 years. So after 25 years, they have a net profit of $16,000. For total savings of almost $30,000. So the savings are substantial. They don't happen right away, but it's a very reliable place to invest your money. Now, if you're thinking about going solar, just 5 quick tips that could get you started. Get at least 3 quotes, more if you can. You want to compare. There's a lot of different companies out there, some very established. There's national chains. There's local ones. Don't forget the local ones too. Often they might offer the best customer service or even the best price. But you want to have a diversity of choices to pick from. A good way to compare the price of one company's quote against the others is to boil it down to dollars per watt. And that one helps you compare apples to apples in terms of price. A lot of installers, when they give you their quote, they're also somehow estimating how much solar they think they can fit on your property. And often they're just basically trying to maximize it, like as much as they can to cover your whole energy usage or to fill up the available space on your roof. You don't have to install that much solar. You can install less if you want. And different installers may have different ideas or be using different equipment about how much solar you can actually put on there. So taking that down to dollars per watt helps you compare apples to apples rather than, it just makes it easier to compare. You also want to make sure you understand the ownership model being offered. So are you going to be paying in cash and own the system outright? Are you going to be using some kind of loan product offered by the installer? So a lot of people finance their solar systems. Installers often have their own financing they can offer. You can also go on the market yourself. Any kind of personal secured or unsecured loan you could use. Home equity lines of credit can be really great with low interest rates still. There's a lot of solar specific loans out there now. A lot of them will let you borrow 26% of the cost of going solar for a year at no interest, basically letting you bridge that period between when you go solar and when you get your tax credit the next year. Or is it going to be, or is the installer offering some kind of third-party ownership where they own it rather than you? Usually that means you put it on your house for free, and then there's some kind of monthly fee you're paying for the energy, or like a monthly lease payment. In that case, the installer is responsible for maintenance. They probably also keep the solar renewable energy credits, and then to make sure it's a good deal for yourself, you want to make sure you understand and like the terms of the lease or the power purchase agreement, and you want to make sure you're actually saving money. So you want to make sure your new solar bill and your now smaller electric bill together are less than what you used to be paying for energy. But you want to be crystal clear about what third-party ownership or financed or cash purchase, what you're doing, and what the terms of that are, especially if it's third-party ownership. Those can be fairly complicated contracts. So you want to make sure you know what you're signing up for. And then when in doubt, you can reach out to us. So we have a free solar help desk available to anyone who needs help. And Alexis just is going to put a link in the chat here. It's that Go Solar on Your Own link. You can sign up for a free 15-minute phone consultation, or you can send us a message and we can help you answer any kind of Go Solar questions that you have. Now, does anyone have any questions about what we've been talking about so far? You can raise your hand, Alexa, if you can help me keep an eye on hands popping up. And I'm going to just scroll through the chat here to see if there's any questions that didn't get answered.
Yeah, I can start one off for you, Henry, while folks can drop in any other questions that they might have. Brandon did ask if all utilities offer bill credits. What about the end of the year usage of unused credits generally? And do any utilities in Pennsylvania follow avoided cost guidelines like Alabama Power, or have they all adopted full credits? That was a lot of questions in there.
Yeah, that's a great question. So all the investor-owned utilities in Pennsylvania offer bill credits, so they have net metering. And I believe all of the rural electric co-ops and the municipal electric companies also do net metering. I'm less sure about the municipal ones, more sure about rural electric co-ops. And what happens at the end of the year is, so every month, if you have extra generation, it rolls over the next month and you can use that later. And it'll keep rolling over up to the end of May. When you get to the end of May, if you have any extra energy left over, it is credited to you at the lower price to compare rate. So that's less than the full retail rate. It's the cost of generation and transmission, not the distribution part of your bill. And the idea is, they don't want to incentivize people to build a system that's a lot larger than they need. They want you to be able to offset your own local usage. However, the fact that they choose the end of May for this date is kind of inconvenient. So April and May are times of year when it's getting a lot sunnier, so your solar will start generating a lot more energy, but you're probably not using that much more electricity. You're probably not necessarily turning the AC on a lot. So people will have a lot of excess credits they're generating in April and May, and then they don't have a chance to use them because at the end of May, that counter starts over again, and anything you have extra is credited back at a lower rate. So that means that some people are generating, less energy than they use in a year, but they're not having it all credited at the full retail rate, if that makes sense, which is unfortunate. It seems like an unintentional effect of just picking the end of May. Yeah, that's a great question from Brandon there. What other questions do we not ask yet? Why don't we scroll up for some older ones?
Yeah, the other one that came in, Henry, was from Athena, who you might be talking about this in the next section, but who asked, how will RGGI help solar incentives, grants, or increases in SRECs?
That's a great question. And I don't actually have a slide on RGGI. It was one of the many things I was unfortunately not able to cover, but I can talk briefly about it now. So if you don't know, RGGI is the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, RGGI. It is a bunch of states in the Northeast who are voluntarily setting a declining cap on the carbon emissions from power plants. So every year it gets a little smaller. and it's like a cap and trade system. So power plants can either choose to reduce their emissions to meet the cap, or if they can't, they can buy credits to pay for those emissions. And the result is you gradually reduce the carbon emissions coming from the electricity sector. And at the same time, the state is raising all this money by selling off those credits that allow polluters to pollute. And then what's probably the most exciting part about RGGI is that you can reinvest all those proceeds from the auctions into things like energy efficiency, into things like solar energy, etc. And that's probably the main reason why in other states, RGGI, even though you're essentially adding this additional fee onto generating electricity, at least carbon intensive electricity, people's electric bills actually go down because of all of these investments that happen in energy efficiency and renewable energy. Pennsylvania is in the process of joining RGGI. It is a long, drawn-out process. It's not even entirely a done deal yet. And if we join it, and the legislature, the executive branch enters us into this RGGI, and the legislature doesn't really do much about it. They're mostly fighting it right now. All the auction proceeds can be used for is specifically clean air work. So it goes to the Clean Air Fund. It can only be used for clean air purposes. If we want to use those funds more broadly, like maybe subsidizing solar installations on low-income multifamily housing, or energy efficiency improvements in public schools, or job training and other investments directed at communities who are reliant on maybe a coal-fired power plant that might be closing a little more quickly because of RGGI. The legislature needs to pass a law to make those things happen, and actually reinvest those proceeds more creatively. Let's see, did I miss any other questions here? Duncan is asking what was the initial cost of the 4 kilowatt system. I can just go back here, $10,000, and we'll share these slides out along with the presentation to anyone who came here tonight. Do a couple more questions. Richard Bloom, hi Rick. You might want to note that the many ads for free solar on Facebook are mostly scams. Yeah, there's a lot of scammy Facebook ads out there. Generally, if you see an ad for solar on Facebook, I would not click on it. They're often very unclear about whether they're selling you a loan product or third-party ownership or cash purchase. So those could be tricky. When in doubt, you can always check with us, and we can help you figure that out. Sean is asking if we're starting a solar co-ops in the Pittsburgh area. We actually do have one, the Triborough Solar Co-op, which I think Alexis put a link in the chat here about. That's anybody in Allegheny County or Westmoreland County can join that. Then finally, I'll just do, C. Rand, there are no state level tax incentives for solar in Pennsylvania yet. That is unfortunate. And then Brandon is asking about, on another webinar, we discussed alternative compliance payments, but it wasn't clear where these were being enacted. Is this part of RGGI, or is this proposed at a local government level? Alternative compliance payment is part of the Alternative Energy Portfolio Standard, which I'll talk about in a moment. It's basically the kind of the punishment fee that a utility has to pay if they don't get enough energy from renewable sources. Okay, a lot of great questions. Let's talk about solar policy some more, since that is what I think most of you are here to learn about. So for some reason, this legislative session that started in January is unusually active with solar legislation. I'm not used to things being like this. I'm used to there's one bill we're working on and it stays in committee for 2 years and nothing happens. But there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. I'm going to be talking about some of it here. Now, probably the most important element of solar policy in Pennsylvania and in many states is something called the Alternative Energy Portfolio Standard, or the AEPS, which is how I'm going to refer to it going forward. Other states have similar things. They often call it an RPS, a Renewable Portfolio Standard. Ours is called an AEPS because it is not all renewable, because this is Pennsylvania. And the core of the AEPS is this: electric utilities must get 18% of their electricity from alternative sources by 2021. 0.5% must come specifically from solar. So some caveats: it's not all electric utilities, it's just the investor-owned utilities like we talked about before. Those alternative sources, they break down: 10% are actual renewables, 8% are other alternative sources, things like waste coal. And actually the goal, the deadline for meeting this target is, well, let's see, Monday, this coming Monday. And we are on track to meet it. You know, we set, these aren't particularly ambitious goals for 2021, but by golly, we're going to meet them. And especially the solar carve out is so disappointingly low, 0.5% of energy from solar. Now, the way this works is electric companies in Pennsylvania cannot own their own power generation. We deregulated our energy system a number of years ago, which means we split the utilities who distribute the energy to you from the companies who actually own power plants who generate it and sell it to utilities. So the utility of which you're a customer, Duquesne Light, Pico, West Penn, whoever it is a retailer. They're buying it wholesale and they're selling it to you at retail. So that means to meet these AEPS goals, they can't just, you know, build a solar farm that covers 0.5% of the electricity they sell. What they do is they buy solar renewable energy credits from existing solar owners. So if you have solar, every time you generate 1,000 megawatt hours of energy, you earn one SREC, one solar renewable energy credit. And utilities are buying these credits to meet their compliance targets. So the SREC seller gets some money and the utility meets, you know, their statutory requirement. And these, how much a single SREC is worth is influenced by a market. The more aggressive, the more ambitious our goal is for solar, that means there's more demand to buy SRECs and the price goes up. Similarly, the larger supply there is of SRECs, the more the price goes down, because, you know, as supply goes up, price goes down. So for example, it used to be that you could sell SRECs from all over the region. You could sell SRECs from North Carolina and Virginia, even I think Chicago was part of the region. You could sell your SRECs into Pennsylvania, and there were a lot of states with a lot more solar than us selling their SRECs here. They kind of flooded our market and it really pushed the value of an SREC down. We have since closed our solar borders, so now for the most part, only solar in Pennsylvania can sell its SRECs here. And this is a really simple, tried and true way to get more solar. So you set a higher solar carve out in your AEPS. That means those SREC values are higher. That means solar becomes more affordable to more people. And that means more solar is being installed. Now, you can see how we compare to our neighbors here. Our 8% renewable energy goal by 2021. Maryland is looking at 50% by 2030. New York, 70% by 2030. New Jersey, also 50% by 2030. I'll point out West Virginia does not have a portfolio standard, so we're beating them there. And Ohio has a portfolio standard that was severely weakened by their legislature a couple years ago. And this is a little bit of an aside, but you may remember there was a big nuclear bailout debate in Pennsylvania where some legislators, you know, our nuclear plants are becoming increasingly expensive to operate and struggling to compete on the market. And so there was an effort to require utilities to buy a certain amount of energy from nukes, even if it wasn't the cheapest energy. That failed in Pennsylvania, but Ohio had the same debate and they did pass a nuclear bailout. They also, in the same process, severely weakened their portfolio standards. So their SRECs are even worse than ours in Ohio. And then it came out later that the reason they were able to pass this big bailout and tank their portfolio standard was bribery. So First Energy, the company whose subsidiaries owned a bunch of nuclear plants in Ohio, had basically bribed the Republican Speaker of the House, Larry Householder, to support this legislation. So there's a lot of FBI indictments going on right now. And it recently came out that now First Energy owns a lot of utilities in Pennsylvania too. They were collecting money from Pennsylvania ratepayers that were somehow used in relation to this scandal. And it's just an example of how, utilities have a big concentration of power and wealth that turns into political power. And it means they can kind of change the rules of the game to benefit themselves. That's why it's important to have a big, a solar movement, grassroots solar movement to counteract that influence. Back to the slide, you can see a pretty direct consequence of us having a weak renewable energy goal is we don't have a lot of solar compared to a lot of other states in the region. Now, there are a number of bills in the legislature here that are trying to update our AEPS in some way. There's HB 1080/SB 501, which would set a goal of 18% renewable with 5.5% solar carve out by 2026. There's another one, HB 1394, that would set a more modest 15% renewable with 2.5% solar by 2030. There's another one that's 30% renewable with 2.5% only distributed solar, that's small scale solar by 2030. So there's a lot going on. I will note that some of these, the House ones that have gone to the House Environmental Resources and Energy Committee, that's chaired by Darryl Metcalf. He is, these are all bills from this year, by the way. He's pretty clearly a climate denier. And so we see any bill that goes to that committee that is in any way pro-solar as being basically dead on arrival, which is unfortunate. But Solar United Neighbors is focusing on this pair, HB 1080, SB 501. We think this probably has the best chance to pass given our legislature. It has bipartisan sponsors, Republicans and Democrats. This was introduced by Dan Laughlin, a Republican from Erie, together with Art Haywood, who's a Democrat from Philadelphia. It's not an unambitious increase. It does put us on a track for more ambitious increases in the future, but it's not so high that it would scare away a lot of people who aren't as excited about solar as we are. I know there's a lot of information on the slide, which is why we will be sending out this recording afterwards. Now, unfortunately, rooftop solar doesn't work for everybody. The National Renewable Energy Laboratory has calculated that somewhere around half of the households and businesses in the country cannot go solar directly because maybe their roof is too shady, their roof is otherwise inappropriate for solar. There's a lot of people who will live in multifamily housing or housing that they don't own who can't go solar. There's a lot of reasons why on-site solar might not work for you. And this is where community solar comes in. So community solar is shared solar, so a large-scale solar array located somewhere else for a lot of people to subscribe to reduce their electric bill. So you have this large off-site solar facility, although it doesn't always have to be off-site, and it doesn't always have to be huge, but the typical model is it's a number of megawatts. It's out in a rural area in a field. It generates solar energy. It goes to the utility sells all that energy, and customers who have opted in to subscribe to this particular community solar project will get a credit on their bill. So their bill will be reduced. They'll pay a subscription fee to the solar panel facility, to the community solar facility. And typically the way it works now in states where they have community solar, you get like a steady 5, 10, 15% discount. So your energy savings are that much larger than what your subscription fee is. So your bill on net goes down. You don't have this big upfront cost you do, like if you go solar. Of course, your overall savings are much more modest than if you put solar on your roof. But it means that solar energy and the financial benefits it brings are accessible to many, many more people. So my house is shaded by a really big oak tree that's on somebody else's property. I can't go solar, but I could do community solar. People who are renters, people who are low income and can't afford solar the traditional way can go solar via community solar. So it has all these benefits for subscribers, of course, saving money. They get to support solar. A lot of subscribers tend to be in urban areas because there's a lot more renters and apartment dwellers. There's a lot more unsuitable shady roofs in urban areas. So a lot of the beneficiaries of community solar, the subscribers tend to be in urban areas, and a lot of the landowners who might host a community solar array tend to be in rural areas, and they're benefiting from these lease payments they're earning from a developer. And those lease payments are written down in a contract. They're the same every year, so that landowner knows what they're going to be getting. It can be anywhere from $800 to $1,000 per acre per year, is numbers I've been hearing. It's a great way to take more marginal land that's maybe not great for farming, put it to productive use, let that farmer diversify their portfolio. It's the kind of thing that can help keep farms in business, this extra revenue stream, because it's so reliable. And then there's cool things you can do to, with the land other than just putting solar panels on it. So there's this emerging trend of pollinator-friendly solar. You plant pollinator-friendly grasses and wildflowers amongst the solar panels. They provide habitat for pollinators, and if you have nearby pollinated crops, they might even get a yield boost from all those pollinators hanging out in the area. So this is kind of unique energy policy that actually unites rural and urban constituents, which usually isn't the case for energy issues. Now, community solar is not legal in Pennsylvania, unfortunately. The way our net metering regulations are set up is it's just basically not popular, or not possible. It's very popular, though. There's a couple bills that would enable community solar. One of them is SB 472. It was introduced this session. It would enable community solar, and subscribers would get fairly modest bill credits. And this is sitting in the Consumer Protection and Professional Licensure Committee in the Senate. We think there should be a House version of this coming out soon. We haven't seen that yet, and not sure when it will. There's also another bill, HB 1396, that will also enable community solar, and then those subscribers will get full retail rate net metering. So whatever their system generates offsets their bill, just like if they had, that solar on their roof. And that's in the House. That's in Darrell Metcalf's Environmental Resources and Energy Committee, so it probably won't be going anywhere. That HB 1396, if you were following along with us last legislative session, that was very similar to HB 531, that older community solar bill that did not pass, despite getting a ton of bipartisan support, including support from the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau. Both of these are bipartisan bills, by the way. And sorry if you hear screaming in the background. That's my one-year-old son who's supposed to be going to bed right now on the other side of this wall. Now I want to talk a little bit more about SB 472. So it's a serious bipartisan effort to pass community solar, and that's great to see in Pennsylvania. This is something that is truly achievable even in a state that's so fossil fuel oriented like Pennsylvania. And it's great to see legislators on both sides of the aisle getting serious about this. It has protections for consumers who subscribe, and then it has extra protections for low-income consumers that subscribe, which is really important because this community solar, when done right, can have really great equity benefits in allowing more people to benefit from solar. What's not so great is those subscriber credits are a pretty low value. Unlike, they're not at the full retail rate, they're at the lower price to compare rate, which means your total savings are going to be fairly, more modest than they would otherwise. The developers under this SB 472, the companies who build the community solar would earn money, one, from the subscription fees that their customers pay them, and then also probably, maybe mostly from this large grid services payment that the bill lays out of 22.5 cents per watt. The idea is that solar provides all these very tangible benefits to the grid. It reduces peak energy load. It can reduce transmission costs. It provides all these benefits to everybody who uses the grid, including, of course, the environmental benefits. And this payment is designed as a way to compensate developers for those tangible benefits. The utility pays this fee to the developers, and the developer recovers, and the utility can recover that from all of their ratepayers. So we're not sure that fee is exactly at the right level. It's fairly high right now, where a project can pay for itself with just that grid services payment in only a few years, which may reduce the incentive for them to actually subscribe customers. So we think there's some tweaking that needs to be done to get that payment level right. But overall, I think this is a promising bill. Another thing, we think it can improve on is making sure that there's not too much red tape for smaller community-led community solar projects. So things like a church with a little bit of land, building a larger solar array and selling subscriptions to their congregants, or smaller projects that might serve multifamily housing where you don't need to connect the solar to every apartment, but you can have everybody financially benefit from it via community solar. And then there's a few other solar bills I want to mention that are out there in legislature this year. So the first is actually not a bill yet, it's just a memo. So it's a letter from a legislator indicating the intent to introduce a bill in the future. This one was submitted by State Senator Katie Muth, and it would prohibit homeowners associations from blocking rooftop solar installations. So this is what's called a solar access law. Now, if you live in a homeowners association, they have really total control over whether you can put solar on your house or not. And unfortunately, a lot of the reasons they will reject a solar installation is because it's based on some misinformation. They think, oh, it's going to hurt your own home's value, or it's going to hurt the home value of your neighbors who now have to look at this solar panel, with poor people, or it's a fire risk, or things like that. We do have a great HOA solar action guide on our website if this is an issue you're dealing with, to help you sell your HOA on solar. But really the only way to permanently fix this is to do what many other states have done and pass a solar access law saying HOAs, you can't take away somebody's right to go solar. There's also another bill called HB 1161. This was introduced by State Rep Lori Mizgorski, who's a Republican from Allegheny County. And this would allow utilities to contract with third parties to build a large solar installation in their territory, and then the utility can then sell subscriptions to that installation to their customers at a premium price. So this kind of sounds like community solar, but it's not. And critically, it's because if you subscribe to the solar project, you're probably going to end up paying more. They're treating it kind of like a premium product rather than, what community solar really should do is it should give you tangible economic benefits when you subscribe. You should be able to save money. This bill doesn't appear to do that. It also kind of sets up utilities as the gatekeepers for this, so only they can decide if these projects are going to get built. So a utility could just say, we're not going to do any of these solar projects in our area, and then there's nothing you can do about it. For some reason, this bill did get voted out of committee pretty quickly. It is now on the House floor. It hasn't moved since then, so we'll see what happens with it. We believe this bill emerged from, this is something that Duquesne Light, the electric utility serving Pittsburgh, was interested in passing. They wanted to be able to offer this product to their customers. And so we're, behind the bill. You know what, before we do this, I see there's a bunch of questions popping up. So please raise your hand if you want to ask your question orally, or I can, Alexis and I can start looking through the questions here. So Alexis, any that
I think Athena's is the one that we have in the chat right now that says, how much more will community solar customers save versus just buying third-party clean energy?
That's a good question. So in Pennsylvania, you can select your electricity provider. So you can select which third party your utility is going to buy your energy from. You can do that on a website called PA Power Switch. And you can sign up for, all 100% renewable energy. You can sign up for renewable energy that comes from Pennsylvania. You can sign up for energy, different prices, variable prices, fixed prices. You can shop around. And it's definitely possible to get energy that's cheaper than what you're paying now. Although you want to make sure you pick something else when your contract is up before your price goes up again. And you can even I found plans that are both all renewable and cheaper than what I'm paying now. They tend to be a little bit harder to find. So we don't know exactly what the community solar market would look like in Pennsylvania. What we see in other states is 10 to 15% savings are pretty common. And I think, actually, I don't know what percentage savings are common on the third-party energy market. The difference is, one, with community solar, you're subscribing to a specific project. So I'm getting energy from this project in this township in Pennsylvania, and you might also know other things about it, like, oh, it's on property of a dairy farm, and they have pollinator-friendly wildflowers planted beneath them, and so you have a more tangible connection to the project. And then those subscription fees are usually fixed over a long period of time, so you're guaranteed these savings for a long time. Whereas with third-party providers, at least in my experience, you have to keep renewing your contract and finding new ones, so you don't get caught with a price that jumps up after 6 months or 8 months or whatever. What else do we have here? Athena is asking, how do we support the solar access bill? Talk to your legislators about it. And since we don't have a bill number yet, because there's no bill, you can just ask them to support the HOA solar bill that was supported by, that's going to be introduced by Katie Muth. Once that bill does come out, we'll have more information on our website about it, including an action alert, so we can help you talk about that bill with your legislators. I see a question from Fred Craybill. Does HB 1161, that's the PA local solar bill, does that mean that another developer like NextEra can't build a solar farm in the area? Only Duquesne Light in our area would have that right. No, so you could still have developers building grid scale solar, utility scale solar farms where they basically are selling their energy into the wholesale market. The only part that the utility has control over is these, what they're calling local solar, where the utility gets to sell subscriptions to that particular solar array. It's kind of why it's confusing, because it does feel very much like the retail energy market. So I'm not entirely sure why a utility can't basically do this already, what new this bill is offering. I just want to highlight this comment from Julia. Note that if you already have solar panels, be careful switching to a third party. You may not be able to get credit for the excess energy you feed back into the grid. This happened to me many years ago. That's absolutely right. So if you shop for third-party energy, you are not guaranteed net metering. Some of those third-party providers do net metering. You would really need to look at the contract to know exactly how they do it, but the only way to be guaranteed our full retail rate Pennsylvania net metering is to stay on default power. So that's my recommendation, is if you go solar, switch back to default power so you're being fully net metered. Otherwise, you might not be able to apply your net metering credits to the generation part of your bill that comes from a third party. Fred is asking, does HB 1161 have an upper limit, like no more than 3 megawatt solar farm? It might, and I can't remember exactly what that limit is, unfortunately. And Gene is pointing out that every solar provider in PA, I think he's talking about the retail energy providers, has been more than price to compare, and yeah, that might be right. Although each utility area will have different offerings, so that may not be true in every particular region. Okay, I do see a raised hand somewhere from Fred. All right, Fred, I'm going to allow you to talk, and you can. Oh, wait a minute. Did you lower it again? Okay.
Maybe you answered his questions in the chat.
Oh, good. Okay. All right. My slides here. So if you want to learn more about anything we were talking about going solar yourself, about these policy issues, about other solar technical questions, or you want some help advocating for better solar policy in Pennsylvania or nationally, check out our website. Alexis just put the link in for our Pennsylvania page here in the chat. We have a lot of great resources there, and you can also sign up to become a member of Solar United Neighbors and help support our work here and nationally. And please do, if you have more questions after we wrap this up, You can reach out to us at pateam@solarunitedneighbors.org. We love to get your questions from you. We love to see pictures of your new solar installation. We love to hear stories of your little tiny electric bills after you go solar, and help you with any questions you might be having. So please do stay in touch. And that's it for tonight, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us. I hope you learned something useful. And yeah, I hope we'll see you all in the future. So thank you, everyone. And we'll be sharing out the recording with all of you once we have that uploaded. Have a good night, everyone. Thanks, Alexis.